Welcome to the Hockey News Big Show trade deadline coverage of 2025. The NHL has been busy, and now we are here to tell you all about the moves that have been made and will continue to get made as we lead up to that deadline of 3 o'clock Eastern. We've got you covered for the next 2 hours. I'm your host, Katie Gauze, joined by Michael Tracos and Ryan Kennedy, here to break down all the action. All right, guys, I know you've been busy breaking down some of the trades live as they happened, but we haven't gotten to talk about the big one yet. Still some small pieces that are obviously being worked out, but everybody has been on Mikko Rantanen watch, and he is on the move to Dallas. So there is an extension in place, 8 years at $12 million per year. And going to Carolina, we know it's going to be Stankoven, a first-round pick in 2026 and 2027. That's what it's looking like, maybe some small pieces. But I need to know immediate reactions to what is probably going to be one of the bigger trades of the day.
Well, Dallas, big winners at the deadline for me. And this is, for Carolina, they finally they escaped what could have been a disastrous trade deadline if they didn't get to move Mikko Rantanen, and they hung on to him with no knowledge of whether he was going to re-sign or not. That was basically playing with fire in my mind. I know, Ryan, you've talked about if they win a championship or not, banners fly forever.
That's right.
But they couldn't go into this deadline with Mikko not signed. So to be able to flip basically Marty Nashis for Logan Stankoven and a couple picks, that's pretty good. I got to give Eric Tulsky a high grade. And then for the Dallas Stars, I don't want to face them in the first round.
No. I mean, that's the really interesting thing here is obviously for Dallas, it's a huge win because they were already one of the better teams in the West. They had, a very good playoff style roster. Thomas Harley took another step at the Four Nations. So even when Miro Heiskanen comes back, their blue line actually looks better than ever, just based on that internal growth. I will say for Carolina, here's my initial thing, right? It's like I love Logan Stankoven as a player. He's still a young player. Mm-hmm. He's still a young NHLer, and he's going to continue to grow as a player. But unless the Hurricanes make another big deal, which is possible because they just acquired a couple of first-rounders,
True.
I don't really see them as a serious top-tier Stanley Cup contender anymore. At least with Rantanen in the lineup, you could say, okay, well, they could go for it, and if they win it all, then whatever happens in the summer happens. As we said, banners fly forever. Now, at this point, with New Jersey's injuries and what Carolina has done so far, as we're speaking right now, it kind of feels like Washington has a free pass to like the conference final. Like it kind of feels like the Metro Division is not what we thought it was going to be. And hey, maybe the Rangers make a run and they're dangerous, but it feels like this was a step back for Carolina. And I know what you're saying. They, Tulsky did what he could under the circumstances. There was that risk, but I can't in good conscience say Carolina is better today than they were yesterday.
Well, yeah, one of the biggest things we talked about, guys, right, was that, if this deal does go through, we don't know what Carolina is going to be able to get that makes them more valuable.
So, when you look at the Central, Colorado made a huge move as well. To get, basically Brock Nelson, who was, take Mikko Rantanen out of it, in terms of rentals. Brock Nelson was the biggest piece available at the deadline. We were talking about it. Dallas could end up as a reward for winning the division, face the Colorado Avalanche. So You're talking about Washington with a free ride to the, conference final. I don't entirely agree with that. I don't think Carolina took that huge of a step back. I still think Carolina still has all the pieces in place. But when you're looking at that Central, Winnipeg and we're going to talk about Winnipeg in a bit, but for Dallas and Colorado, they really established themselves as the go-to teams that, you don't want to face.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing there too is, Minnesota's battling a lot of injuries right now. Do they slip into a wild card spot, and does Colorado surpass them? I know, Katie, you were saying this on Twitter. We might get a Colorado-Dallas first-round series. It would be the Rankin Bowl. And that would be quite the first round tilt. Because, I mean, if you think about it in terms of like, yeah, they're in the same conference, but in terms of quality, that could be a Stanley Cup final, right? In terms of quality, Avs Stars. So, I mean, that would be really something. But yeah, the Central, because again, we'll talk about Winnipeg later, but I think the Jets made some nice kind of subtle moves. And, you know.
So, like, staying in the Central right now, is Dallas for sure the best team in that division?
It's hard to say because, like, I mean, Winnipeg has been the best team all year, and they did make a couple of nice, astute additions in Luke Schenn and Brandon Tanev.
Why do they all have to play in the Central Division, Ryan?
It's true, right? Yeah. But then, of course, the Pacific is Vegas and Edmonton, and Los Angeles lurking there as well. So there's a lot of top heaviness in the West.
This is why you need a 1 versus 8 in the conference.
That's just a fair point.
Because, you know, it feels like if I was going to rank right now my top contenders for the Stanley Cup, I think Dallas for sure. Like, even before the deadline, they were my number 1 team.
Yeah.
Right now, they are number 1. I would say like Colorado and Winnipeg are probably in my top 5. Winnipeg for sure. It might be my number 2 team right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Colorado's interesting because of the goaltending. I mean, it has been good with Mackenzie Blackwood, but is it the ultimate answer? I mean, we were talking earlier. They did win a cup with Darcy Kemper, and he did have an eye injury at the time. So clearly they don't need, you know, Ken Dryden in net to win a Stanley Cup. But having said that, I mean, I'd be more comfortable with Connor Hellebuyck, even if he's had his ups and downs in the playoffs.
Now let's talk about Winnipeg. You know, getting Luke Schenn on the back end, not the flashiest of moves, but that is the piece that they needed. And then up front, we were teasing this on our last show, I believe. You know, Brandon Tanev to go on a third line with Adam Lowry.
Yeah.
Arguably maybe the biggest, toughest, well, not biggest when you talk about Tanev, but in terms of a physicality and know what kind of role they play, that's going to be a dangerous third line they've got there. And then, you know, like I said, Luke Schenn added much needed physicality to the back end. And, you know, that's a Winnipeg team that by all accounts didn't need to add much because, you know, they are the best team in hockey right now.
Yeah, and I think what Luke Schenn gives you is a lot of flexibility in your defense core where maybe, you know, like if a Logan Stanley is struggling, then he gets bumped down a bit more and Luke Schenn takes some of those minutes where we know that Luke Schenn is a fantastic playoff performer and has been so even later in his career. When he came back to Toronto, he was one of the better Leafs blue liners for that, albeit short playoff run. So Winnipeg's, they're very interesting because it feels like there's not a lot of believers outside of Manitoba. At the same time, like, are they missing anything glaring?
No. It's Winnipeg, though. They lost to Colorado in the first round, so I think everyone's still wondering, like, are they for real? Woody, do we got you there? What do you make of this deadline?
Yeah, you guys got me back?
We can hear
it.
Hey, that's the beauty of going live, isn't it? You know, it's all right. I'll just smile and sit here. You guys can talk for the whole 2 hours. It makes my life easier. No, listen, I think it's exciting. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask when we're kind of on that topic of the Central still, I know we touched on the Avalanche getting that 2C in Brock Nelson. But Ryan, you're our prospect guy. And I know he played one NHL game, but Cal Ritchie has got, or a couple NHL games. Cal Ritchie is an absolute top prospect in every sense of the word. I know Avs are clearly going for it, but what do you think about this move? They were very hesitant for a lot of trades to get rid of him. They were really holding on to him. They valued him. What do you make of this return to the Islanders?
I think the Islanders did a nice job here because you're right. I mean, Colorado's also in a position where they don't have a deep prospect pool because they had, you know, they won the Stanley Cup. They've been going for the Stanley Cup, so they've traded some prospects away. You know, Cal Ritchie, you know, we said this in a web exclusive video. He's number 13 in Future Watch overall, right? So he automatically becomes New York's top prospect. Before he came into the fold, it was Cole Eiserman, who was 38th overall. So obviously, you can do the math there. You know, Cal Ritchie, a big injection into that Islanders pipeline. I wouldn't be surprised if he played for the Islanders next season. He had those games in Colorado where he got a taste of it.
Yeah.
He clearly wasn't ready. There were things to work on, but that's what he has this season back in Oshawa to do. Work on his play away from the puck. Continue to get stronger. He's already a strong kid, and he's got good size. And, the Islanders, they're going to have spots open in the fall. I mean, I'm not saying he can just jump in right to Brock Nelson's slot, but he could grab, at least a bottom six role to begin with if they needed that. Get those reps. He's a smart player. He's a skilled player. Didn't do much of the World Juniors, but Canada, they were a mess. So I'm not even worried about that. I think Oshawa has the chance to go on a pretty deep playoff run in the OHL, and that's great experience as well. So, good on the Islanders for, resting that prospect out of Colorado's hands. By the same token, I mean, this is a deal the Avs needed to make. They're in their window. They had a distinct need, and Brock Nelson met that need.
Yeah, no question. I like it. I mean, it's one of those things where we've seen the prices going up kind of everywhere. I mean, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen Tampa do. I mean, my goodness, the price is steep and everybody's pushing all of their chips in. What do you make of the moves that we've seen from Julien Brisebois?
Boy, this guy's a savage.
Yeah.
I really, if I'm a hockey fan, I love what Julien Brisebois is doing. Similar to, I've said this about Vegas, give me Vegas every day, every year, basically. They want to win the cup. And same thing with Tampa. We kept saying, okay, they're getting older. They got rid of Stamkos. It felt like, okay. Sergachev as well. Is this still the same Tampa Bay team that's going to be a cup contender, or are they have they taken a step back? And then you look at what Brisebois is doing. This is what you want out of a team. And this is, we were waiting for the Atlantic to kind of wake up. And then I guess it was spurred on by what Florida did in getting Seth Jones. And then Tampa makes their moves, getting Yanni Gourde. And
Bjorkstrand.
And then Toronto finally answered the call and getting Scott Laughton. I don't know if Scott Laughton is, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. But, it's finally the Atlantic has woken up. And, back to Brisebois, I love his quote, just talking about I don't care about prospects, basically. You can bank prospects. I'd rather have players in the lineup right now. And, how can you argue with the results? They've won 2 cups recently, and they made 3 straight cup finals. So, do you find any fault with what Tampa was doing?
I don't. And the reason why I'm cool with that is because, they have a very good scouting staff that has proven that they can find gems outside of the first round.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov are the best examples, but even a Ross Colton that they found, obviously now playing for Colorado. But, we've seen time and time again, Tampa finding those gems, those players that maybe they take a few more years to actually get to the NHL. Maybe they go to college first. Isaac Howard is actually a pretty good example where he was a late first rounder, but, playing for Michigan State now, had a bit of a hiccup where he started at Minnesota Duluth. It wasn't a good fit for him because he's more of an offensive player, but great for the Spartans since he came over. Maybe you see him play a year in the AHL next year, and then he tries out for Tampa, the year after that. But then there's a great young top 6 forward potentially at your disposal that could replace, somebody who a Yanni Gourde or an Oliver Bjorkstrand, whatever. So I'm with you. And I was thinking the same with Vegas. It's what if the chickens don't come home to roost? It's what if the Golden Knights just consistently get players when they need it, sacrifice in the draft? I mean, Hurdle's not old. Eichel's not old. No. Theodore's not old. Maybe they'll just be good for a very long time.
And Brendan Brisson wasn't panning out. You look at his AHL
not yet, no.
stats, it's not like they traded a guy that you're going, okay, maybe they're going to call him up for a playoff run, or maybe next year he's going to be part of your top 6 or top 9.
Right.
It's very much looking like, okay, maybe a change of scenery is what this guy needs.
Yeah, he needs to be top 6. Yeah. And that wasn't going to happen in Vegas.
No.
Right. All right, well, let's talk about one team that could have plenty more moves. I don't know. They've been wheeling and dealing, but the Pittsburgh Penguins have been busy in terms of just gathering up the assets. We've seen Kyle Dubas making a lot of moves. We saw him with the Luke Shen flip, obviously. He sent Bunting to Nashville. So there's been a lot of moves that the Pittsburgh Penguins have obviously been making to kind of build up what we know that they need. They sent Beauvillier to Washington, getting a second-round pick there. People have been loving the moves by Dubas. And again, it's not necessarily always exciting for a fan base to just watch guys go out for picks, but they've got the most picks of anybody as we head towards 2026. So what can you say about the things that we've seen from Kyle Dubas so far on this trade deadline?
It's not an easy spot that he was in. And let's be honest, Kyle Dubas going to Pittsburgh was not, a desirable location for a lot of GMs. Like, you can't break up the core. He tried to go for it by acquiring Erik Karlsson when he first got there and a couple other players. And, it hasn't worked out. To be able to flip Michael Bunting for Luke Shen and then flip Luke Shen for more picks.
Yep.
Wow. Kind of masterful. And you got to give him credit. Like, the number one, problem in Pittsburgh is their cupboard's bare. And so, he's got more rounds of ammunition now, sort of in his gun. Does this make Pittsburgh a team that you're going to look at and say, okay, next year they're a playoff contender? No. Probably not. And that's the sad part is they still got Sidney Crosby, who's playing at the top of his game, even at his age. And yet, it is kind of sad. Like, I think some of us are holding out hope going, would Sidney Crosby go to Colorado? And, it wasn't going to happen. It's kind of insulting that he was even having to answer those kind of questions. But I like what Dubas was able to do.
I agree. I mean, getting a couple of seconds already and getting just an actual draft class to play with in Pittsburgh, which we have not really seen, in the past decade or so. It's basically at this point, they've got Owen Pickering and, Rutger McGroarty and, going from there. And actually we got Future Watch right here. We can look at Pittsburgh and what they have so far, 3 in the top 100, but none in the top 50. Like Harrison Brunicky, the defenseman, is their top prospect at number 71 overall. Then you got McGroarty and Emil Pianiniemi at 92. So, they're ranked 24th out of 32 teams in Future Watch. So work to be done for sure. But I like that Kyle Dubas has set his scouting department up for success here. Now, is it a scenario where they package some of those picks to move up and get somebody even better? The ultimate thing here is like what happens in the draft lottery with Pittsburgh. Like, how high can they actually pick? Because, we talked about Crosby and, how quickly could they get him help from a development standpoint? It's going to be a couple of years unless you get like a top 2, top 3 player who can go right into the NHL. Right now they have 2 first-rounders for 2025. They have their own and they have the Rangers. So the Rangers one, that's going to be like in the 20s, right?
Sure.
We'll see.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, but the Pittsburgh one, I mean, they could win the lottery. That could be a top 5 pick. Maybe they get Matthew Schaefer. Maybe they get Michael Misa. A player like that where maybe they can go straight to the NHL or at the least one more year and then they're in the NHL. And then you have a pretty special player, based on what we project from guys like that, a Porter Martone, a James Higgins, I would say all 4 of those players are basically like either in the NHL next year or 1 year away.
Wow.
So if you're Sidney Crosby, you might say to yourself, okay, well, I proved myself at the 4 Nations. I've still got it.
Yeah.
I've got the Olympics to look forward to in 2026. So maybe we have another down year next year. It's okay. But after that, we'll go for one more run. Who knows what? I mean, is Malkin even still a Penguin at that point?
Ooh.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, so much can happen.
That would be certainly interesting. And let's talk a little bit about, another team who's kind of in that assets mode now, or at least so to seem, would be the Boston Bruins. They made a deal with Edmonton. So we saw Trent Frederick heading out there along with Max Strome and Peter Hauser. Boston gets Max Warner and a second and a fourth round pick. New Jersey in the mix there as well for some salary retention. But what's interesting here is that Trent Frederick is currently on the LTIR, but he could be available for the playoffs. So it's kind of it could be a slick move in Edmonton's sense because it allows them to maybe make more moves. But what do we think about maybe first Edmonton's part of this deal? And then we can kind of touch on all the drama surrounding Boston, because there's certainly some interesting storylines there with this continuous Brad Marchand watch to the West. What do we think, guys?
Well, let's just start with Trent Frederick.
Yeah.
Of the move. I know he's injured right now. Hopefully he gets, I don't even know if there's a timeline, if he's going to be back right before the playoffs or right around there. But, he's sort of that player that you want. Like, Edmonton really took a step back. I don't think enough has been made about the team that Edmonton had going into the final last year compared to this year's team. This year's team is a lot worse. Yeah. And just even on paper, aside from like Leon Draisaitl, not a lot of players I don't think any player is having a better year this year than they did last year. Then you lose Dylan Holloway, you lose Broberg, you lose Michael McLeod. That's a lot of speed. Ryan McLeod, sorry. McLeod brothers always get confused.
All lost Michael McLeod.
Yes, I'm not even go there. But you lose a lot of offense. I think I saw somewhere it was like, the difference between those three players and like Jeff Skinner, Arvidsson, and trying to think who the other forward that would have replaced them. But it's a discrepancy of like 20 goals. So it's a weaker team. I think Trent Frederick helps in that regard. But then the defense, that's where they really needed to really shore things up. Like you look at, Stuart Skinner's having a difficult time. Yeah. Both goalies are right now. But boy, oh boy, Edmonton's defense and just their forwards don't make life easy on playing for Edmonton. Like it's got to be like, it's like playing for a Blue League team at times. Like it's just grade A chance after grade A chance. So you almost kind of like, feel sorry for the goaltenders.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And in terms of defense, they got Jake Wallman. We'll see how that works. John Klingberg doesn't seem like that was. I mean, whatever. John Klingberg was like a free player.
Seems like they're getting the same kind of defenseman, though.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're tighter. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But I agree with you on Trent Frederick. I mean, this is a player. He's a playoff style guy. He'll fight. He'll play hard minutes. He's not a top six guy, but Edmonton does not have to worry about that. They have some of the best top six players in the world. What they need to couch against is when they're in a hard, heavy series, do they have guys that can punch back both literally and figuratively when you're facing a Vegas, a team that we know is not only big and strong, but also fast enough, right? Like we saw that when Vegas beat Florida in the Stanley Cup final 2 years ago, where it's like, ooh, Florida, they're really hard to play against. And it's like, you can't get to the middle of the ice. And Vegas is like, we can get to the middle of the ice. We will go there frequently. And this won't be much of a Stanley Cup final, especially with Matthew Tkachuk out for most of it. Edmonton, they need to be prepared for that series where it's a bit more of a slog, where there's not a lot of open ice, where McDavid has the opportunity to kind of wheel around, pick up speed, and cut through, as he is so good at doing. Be prepared for a series where maybe you're not getting a ton of power play opportunities, where all those lethal guys like Draisaitl and Bouchard can set up. So with Trent Frederick, I like the fit. It feels like the kind of depth. I say depth move, even though he's a middle six guy.
But he can play up and down, I guess.
He can play up and down a little bit, yeah. But that's the kind of move I feel that they need to become a little more versatile as a team.
Yeah, guys, it looks like we got a trade ruling in here. It's nothing official yet, but Pierre LeBrun reporting that the Columbus Blue Jackets are acquiring Luke Kunin from the San Jose Sharks. So that was a name I know we were seeing thrown around a little bit with Toronto. What do we think of this deal for Columbus? They're going for it.
Hey, I like that Columbus is going for it. Like, nice reward for the season they're having. And, that wild card, or those wild card spots in the East, it really is a toss-up. Ottawa's made some moves today, and they're holding down a wild card spot. Columbus is right in there. Detroit's right in there. So Columbus could have easily just stood pat, or even sold a little and just said, like, you know what, just being where we are is is reward enough. But getting Kunin, I don't know. What do you think of that move?
I like it. I think the message it sends from GM Don Waddell is, I believe in you guys. And, I think there's been a lot of talk. I guess we'll see what happens with Ivan Provorov, but it sounds like they might just hold on to him. And, if they lose him in the summer, they lose him. But it felt like Waddell's saying, like, these guys have battled so hard this year and they've exceeded expectations. I don't want to upset that chemistry. I don't want to pull guys out of the lineup when they are in the fight. So, in Cunning, you get like a sort of Swiss Army knife kind of like depth player. I mean, he's not going to be in your top 6, but Columbus doesn't need that, right? Like, we've seen the growth from Fantilli, from Voronkov, from Marchenko. When Sean Monahan gets back, he was fantastic in the first half of the season for them. So
it's almost like getting a guy at the deadline when Monahan comes back too.
Very true. I think, with Luke Cunnin, you need depth, right? Especially down the stretch, right? You're going to have injuries. And if you get into the playoffs, it's kind of a war of attrition. Here's a guy that can play in your bottom 6, give you some minutes, and just give you an option, right? You don't want to be shorthanded when, say, you have to win the final 2 games of the season in regulation to make it in.
I like it. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about depth. You just mentioned it there, adding a piece that can help you and you need them down the stretch. Minnesota Wild making a move to bring in Justin Brazeau. And I also bring this trade up because I want to hear Michael pronounce Murat. How do we say it?
Good enough. Actually, I think it's actually who's. Yeah, because you don't pronounce the K.
Who's
give me your best effort.
Why you gotta be like that, Katie? I thought we were.
Hey, we would never make it through an episode or a trade deadline show without putting you on the spot a little bit. But Boston getting back Jacob Lupau.
Killington, okay, so
that's right, Killington. What do we think about this deal? Minnesota obviously trying to add a little bit of security.
Well, good luck, Minnesota, because the division with Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg.
Right.
So, unfortunately, you look like the odd man out right now. The Wild's had a great year, but when I'm looking at the competition in the Central, it does feel like they just don't have the firepower to hang with the other 3.
This trade to me felt like Minnesota and GM Bill Guerin saying, okay, we've got some injury problems, but we are a playoff team right now.
Yeah.
Let's not let that slip away. Like Justin Brazeau, he's a goal scorer. He's a huge body, does not play with pace. And his skating is the reason he did not get drafted in the first place, even though he put up a ton of points in the OHL. Good for him on, carving out a career where NHLer, maybe he's a tweener. Boston wasn't very deep this year. But I do like the message that it sends to the Wild, where it's like, we're not giving up here. We're waiting for Kaprizov to return. We're waiting for a couple of other guys. But, if Justin Brazeau can give us like a little bit of a bump right now when we're kind of like suffering, then let's make that move. And it's, it was not like a blockbuster trade, but I do think that it was one where, Minnesota's going to have to do something to keep up with the rest of the pack. Because, as we were talking about earlier, like Colorado right now is a wild card team, but they are right behind the Wild. And that could easily change in the next week.
The question becomes, though, not that you don't want to just win and get the highest point total that you can and get the highest seeding that you can, but you start to think about, like, okay, if Colorado passes Minnesota, that means they have to most likely face Dallas. I don't necessarily see the Winnipeg Jets getting passed by anyone. Is it almost a weird situation where it's like you may be safer if you're staying in the wild card than setting yourself up for this 2-3 matchup, which we see time and time again in the first round of the playoffs, is just powerhouses knocking each other out?
It's going to be difficult because when you look at that division, you're right. Like, you don't want to be a wild card team because then you've got to face Winnipeg
or Vegas.
Right. Then if you finish second or third, you may have to play Dallas.
Yeah.
It's a lose-lose.
Easy matchup here. Like it just seems like, whoever comes out of the East, you may face a team out of the West that is just completely decimated because they have played a Stanley Cup final maybe twice over, maybe 3 times over by the time they get to the final.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, there are people out there that are saying it's time to expand the playoff field. And, I know you mentioned 1-8 or 1 versus 8 earlier.
Yeah.
I like that because I feel like we've seen too many of the same playoff matchups.
I'm kind of bored of seeing Toronto against Boston, to be honest.
Or Toronto against any Florida team, for that matter. If you at least had a play-in game, right? Like if you kind of did what the NBA had been, I don't know if they still do it.
Wildly successful.
Yeah, you do a 9 versus 8, and then that team plays the number 1 seed. Then at least if you are number 1, because we talked about this last year, like Dallas finished first and played Vegas in the first round, right? Like what kind of reward is that to play the defending champions? I mean, they won, but it took 7 games. And I think by the time Dallas got to Edmonton, they were like basically in a state where it's just too much top competition. So, I mean, maybe that's part of it is like teams. It's weird to say teams are so good now. I mean, I suppose they always were, but maybe it's because things are a little more top heavy, where there are clear rebuilders and, clear sort of basement dwellers.
There used to be a couple of junk teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, it felt like that.
It did feel like there was always a couple of weaker seeds. Like I know LA made it to the cup, won a cup as an 8 seed, but now it seems like if you're in the playoffs, like there's some really good teams that don't make the playoffs.
Right.
So if you're in the playoffs, it's not like, okay, well, you just snuck in. It's like, no, you're a good team.
Yeah, it's almost more important, like if you do finish second in your division, or I suppose if you finish third in the conference, like if we're going 1-8, right? Yeah. If you finish third in the conference, then instead of if you are playing, I guess the wild card team could be, say, Calgary or Utah, for example. Then at least it's like a bit of a reward for actually putting up points in the regular season and having a consistent year. I don't know.
No, you're right.
Boy.
If I'm facing Calgary or Vancouver, I'm happy.
Guys, we got some more news rolling in. Reports are saying that Charlie Coyle has been traded to Colorado, and in return, Casey Middlestat is headed to Boston. Ooh. We knew Middlestat was a guy that we had our eye on as a possible target to be leaving Colorado. It hasn't worked. What do we think?
Okay, so I didn't mind Casey Middlestat as a number 3 center.
Yeah.
That being said, Charlie Coyle is such a huge upgrade over Casey Middlestat.
Scary.
He's played the number 3 center role, and he's played it to a T. Like, again, we're in Toronto, so we saw a lot of Charlie Coyle with the Bruins matching up against Austin Matthews, basically being a thorn in Toronto's side. Yeah. He's a real solid addition. And again, Colorado, they went into this deadline with Nate McKinnon and not much else down the middle. Now you've got McKinnon, Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
that's pretty hot.
This is a really good team.
Yeah.
I still have questions about their goaltending, Katie. I don't know if
they could use another D-man too, but
I have to be the guy. This is very much looking like a Darcy Kemper situation.
Very well could be. I mean, if you got Cale Makar and Devon Taves playing like 28 minutes a night in the playoffs, then you're pretty secure. Oh, okay. My initial thought of this is like, I think Boston fans might hate Casey Middlestat. He's not a typical like bruising, 100% effort, like hard to play against guy. No. Now, maybe he uses that skill he has to put up some nice points, and maybe he finds chemistry with some of their guys.
They do need centers.
And look, the Bruins are in transition. I don't mind this from the sense of, they're opening up spots. I kind of feel bad for like David Pastrnak because he's the one guy that, he wasn't there for the Stanley Cup. And I'm sure he's hoping he'll be there for the next one. But Are we kind of resetting the clock completely in Boston at this point? Because you're basically looking at, they got McAvoy. Right. As we speak, they have Marchand, but we don't know what will happen. We still got an hour before the deadline.
Exactly.
he said.
He does. I don't see him going anywhere unless he's like, I know he doesn't want to go anywhere.
Even if he does, he might be back next year.
Maybe, right? So you got Pasternak, Swayman, McAvoy, Marchand. That's a great core, but there's not much around them, especially with a player like Charlie Coyle going out the door. So, man, I mean, the more Colorado does, and I mean, Katie, you know this team really well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was talking to someone from Colorado earlier, especially
they very well looked like they were going to be losers going into after the deadline, just because of trading Rantanen for Nashis. It didn't sit well with a lot of Avs fans, and then you're looking now.
Looking better now.
Yeah, it's looking better now. You've got Nashis. You've got such depth down the middle. I'm sure Nate's real happy about that. And you got Coyle, who, again, like they were going to have to ask Middlestat to play a checking role or play a third line center role, which that's not his MO. Like I don't think he's good enough for a top line role. Obviously, he hasn't shown it. But to ask him to play a third line role, it's like it's kind of like square peg, round hole kind of deal.
Yeah.
Charlie Coyle, this is what he was built for.
Totally.
Yeah. 100%. I agree with you. And I mean, I was talking to some people out in Colorado, and so far, despite the initial shock of what happened with Rantanen, they're feeling pretty happy. And that was before this Coyle move was made. So, I mean, now the hindsight is fully 2020. It's officially reported that Mikko Rantanen will sign that 8-year deal at $12 million a year. I guess my question for you guys is, what do we think about what went down with Mikko over these last few weeks? It is so confusing. I was, hearing reports from Colorado that they offered him the exact same thing. So is this just a matter of his management just getting their wires crossed and they're trying to make up for it now, going to Dallas? Because just going to a tax-free state when you could have stayed with your team and made another run seems like it would have made so much more sense. And they were almost trying to fix what they broke originally. What do we think about how the extension and everything that's happened with Mikko has gone down?
Yeah, there should be like a movie made on how everyone sort of botched this, from Eric Tolson to Mikko Rantanen's agent to the Colorado Avalanche. Like, it just seems like you mentioned signals crossed, like miscommunication or something. But it felt like Mikko wasn't even involved in any of this because I never got the sense that he ever got, and I know it's only been a few weeks or whatever, maybe a month now, but he never really got over the fact that he was traded.
Yeah. And
he never really gave Carolina that fair shot.
I mean, his possession numbers were really good in Carolina. Like, if you look at the actual Corsi and him playing with Sebastian Aho, it was amazing. Like, it was like 65%. So
do you think it was a matter of time before it just started?
I think it was. Yeah. And my sort of take on this is, and I mean, again, I have no insider information, but I wonder if, they had a certain expectation where you say Mikko Rantanen, what top 10 player in the world, top 15 before the trade, like when he was still with Colorado.
Look at how many 70-point seasons he's put up.
Yeah.
It's money in the bank.
Yeah. So, and they would look and say, okay, well, the cap's going up as percentage of the cap. He is worth X amount. And, obviously negotiations with Colorado got to the point where the Avs said, we're not sure. And we're worried that he'll leave for nothing. So let's make this deal. For Carolina, I think in their mind, they were like, well, once he gets here, he'll love it. We're a great team. We're going to be contenders for the next 5, 6, 7 years. That's his window. And, we got a great Finnish center in Sebastian Aho. I mean, they'll be piling up points right away. It didn't quite work out that way. So then you say to yourself, like, okay, well, are other teams questioning Rantanen's ultimate value on the open market? Maybe he's not a $13 million guy or even 12.5. So then you get to an awkward position where Dallas ends up signing him for 8 years times 12, which I'm sure Colorado would have given him happily.
Yeah, they would have.
First place. Yeah. But that's how it all went down, right? It was just a series of unfortunate events, as Lemony Snicket would say. and here we are. And the Stars turn out to be the winners at the moment. Now let's see where Rantanen fits in that lineup, and if he can get back up to speed and be that guy that has 100-point, capabilities. We've seen him do it before. We've seen him do it recently.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of my thing is like this was something that evolved like both quickly and also in kind of an out of control way that I'm not blaming anyone, but there was definitely circumstances that were unforeseen.
Does Jack Russell be going back his Rolex or whatever you had to?
No, keep that Rolex.
No, that's a non-refundable Rolex.
You don't get that back.
No.
Does anyone wear, what is it, 96?
No.
Yeah, it's 96. I doubt it. How weird was it that somebody was wearing it in Carolina?
If he has to buy Rolexes this year, maybe he should have asked for $13 million.
There you go.
Well, and I'm sure that Sebastian Aho has some hurt feelings where he's like, really, man, you didn't want to, I'm not cool enough for you. You had to go find other Finns. But I think a big sigh of relief is going throughout the Eastern Conference, because when the rumors were circling about the potential of him ending up in Florida and the thought of Barkov playing alongside Mikko Rantanen, I mean, I was ready to hand over the Stanley Cup with that kind of a lineup. But he goes back to the West, which I'm sure GM Chris McFarland is not thrilled about. So Mikko moves on to Dallas. He can wear 96 and he'll be making a total of $96 million. So all the stars have aligned in Dallas. We'll see how things work out. All right. Let's talk about a trade that I thought was very interesting, because it shows you that sometimes one guy's trash is another team's treasure. That's Jake Wallman getting traded to Edmonton. I know we mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about the work that's being done by San Jose's GM, because he took a guy that they were basically giving away for free, and they gave him a pick just to take him, turned him into a first-round pick conditionally himself. Talk a little bit about what the Sharks have done at this deadline.
Yeah, I guess, we know San Jose was not going to make the playoffs, so they had to, start trading bodies. It's funny because, no one was really talking too much about San Jose's players going into the deadline. Like, it wasn't like
they made their moves already.
Yeah. So, to get some value for Jake Wallman, it is great. Again, I kind of question, Ryan was mentioning this earlier, like, why Jake Wallman for the Edmonton Oilers? Like, you needed more guys like Matthias Ekholm, not more Jake Wallman.
They needed Luke Schenn.
So, I don't know. How did you feel about Jake Wallman? It's not a name that many of us were even talking about going into this.
No, I mean, he's really kind of reinvented himself in San Jose. And it was peculiar that Detroit let him go in the first place, because he was pretty good for the Red Wings as well.
Okay.
For San Jose, my only concern is that, when you're rebuilding, you got to have some guys that are still there. And they do have Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who signed through next year as well. And he's, a consummate veteran, a lifelong Shark.
That poor guy.
Yeah. But he gets to live in California, so that's not bad for him. Otherwise, Mario Ferraro's 26 right now. Liljegren's 25. Jan Ruta's 34, but injured. I like what Mike Grier is doing, because we've already seen that Macklin Celebrini is a prime time player.
Yeah.
No question number one center. I'm gonna be a little spicy here, maybe better than Connor Bedard. Like if you were to choose now,
he does more things than Connor Bedard.
Yes.
He plays both ends of the puck.
Yes.
Both sides of the puck.
His battle statistics are crazy good.
Yeah.
Will Smith has started to really heat up. So you've got a couple of great young forwards.
Still got Tyler Toffoli there for a couple more years, and he's leading the team in goals right now. As he always does, it seems like. He gets traded to a team, he leads them in points or goals, and then he kind of fades away.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Gets traded again.
Nice system where you have Sam Dickinson, who was your second first rounder last year after Celebrini. I'm not saying he's going right to the Sharks next year, but I mean it's possible. He's having a breakout year for the London Knights in the OHL. Igor Chernyshov came over to the OHL and has been on fire.
San Jose in a better spot than Chicago right now?
Oh, like 100%. Yeah. Because in Chicago, you've tried a couple of things already, and neither of them worked.
And you got a nice young goalie in San Jose as well.
You do, yeah. You do have, and you got Askarov, still coming up. San Jose has 2 first-rounders this year, because they have Dallas's first-rounder from the Granlund Ceci trade.
So 30. So what is
So
that?
you get
32nd
you're gonna
overall?
pick second and 32nd. But I don't think it's going to take much longer. And the benefit now is you have your number one center, and Will Smith could be your number two center in a couple of years. You potentially have a great young set, like a top pairing set or defenseman in Sam Dickinson. So you get to the point where you add a couple more top end picks, but then with any extra picks that you've been picking up, you can go out and get some veterans in the summer, whether it's free agency or trade. You can start filling in that lineup. And who knows? I mean, maybe Logan Couture. I mean, we've been waiting on him. Hopefully he comes back. We don't know. But
we're in the road with Logan Couture.
Exactly.
Haven't heard that name in a hot minute.
2 years. A great veteran who could be your shutdown center at that point. If Celebrini is that advanced by that time. So
what are we talking about? Like 2 years from now, they're going to be making that push for a playoff spot?
I can see it. Yeah.
So
all right, well, you just talked about
8 years. 8 years now. It's like
the rebuild has already started. Like it should take 8 years for you to be a contender from the basement. They've already been in the basement. They're still in the basement, but at least they've already made some high picks.
How about this one, guys? We've got it official that the Red Wings have acquired forward Craig Smith and goaltender Peter Mrazek from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Joe Veleno. So we were just talking about Chicago. Obviously, they're in an interesting spot. What do we think of this move?
Well, Mrazek doesn't help you.
no.
Craig Smith is a utility player.
Yeah.
I guess he gives you a bit more of a definition than Joe Veleno. Is this the Iser plan? At least Craig Smith, you know what you're getting. I mean, with Joe Veleno, I think, when they drafted him, I'm sure they were hoping that he would become like a scoring center. And, granted, he's already 25. Got 10 points this year. So I don't think that's going to happen.
This seems
it's
like
not really getting the juices
trade.
flowing.
A little bit, yeah.
I don't think it's going to move the needle for Detroit one way or another. Make them better. It makes them worse. You said maybe Craig Smith is just, he's a better fit, obviously, than a Joe Veleno. But
for the Hawks, it's like they get rid of Mrazek because, they have Spencer Knight.
Yep.
Thanks to that trade. So Spencer Knight with Arvid Soderblom as your backup. At least now you have that definition where it's like you don't have to deal with, a three-headed goaltender situation, and you get rid of Mrazek's contract.
So many backup number 3 goalies on the move this year.
True.
It's weird. Like
Dreger,
Kakkonen.
Yeah, they're all getting traded for each other.
Yeah, well, we saw Florida complete that goalie swap 1-for-1. Let's talk another trade from a team that we haven't really gotten to touch on a lot yet. That's the LA Kings getting Andrei Kuzmenko, who we already saw was on the move once. We talked a lot about it at the time, how we did not think that Kuzmenko was necessarily going to be a fan favorite of John Tortorella in Philly. So he is headed back out west to the Kings. What do we think about this addition for LA?
Sorry, Katie, you just broke up as you're finishing that one for us.
Oh, no worries. You got me. Just want to know what you guys think about Kuzmenko to the Kings.
Ryan had a funny. What were you saying about Kuzmenko?
Oh yeah, you'll love him for the first 5-10 games, and then he'll just stop producing. But I will say, it's a low risk trade. I think they gave him a third for him. Surprisingly, LA has one of the worst power plays in the NHL. They're at 15%. Kuzmenko, in the right scenario, can definitely score, right? He likes to be down low. He had 14 power play goals that year in Vancouver, the big year he had with Elias Pettersson. So I think for the Kings, this is like a worthy gamble where essentially he's Arthur Kaliev, who they got rid of.
That's true.
But with a bit more of a track record.
Another enigmatic Russian.
Yeah, exactly. Although Kaliev, I think he's from Uzbekistan originally. Or his parents are from Uzbekistan. He is from Staten Island. although he did not know who Wu-Tang Clan was when I asked him, which was stunning for me. But we will move on. At least with Kuzmenko, you can say, okay, well, he can be a power play guy. I'm not sure how much utility he has otherwise, but if you're the Kings and you're already pretty good at most other aspects, I think it's worth it where if you get into a playoff series, you cannot be tanked by your power play, right? You have to, especially if you're playing Edmonton.
I was going to say, you're going to go against arguably the best power play. Well, I don't know if statistically it is this year, but
right, it's not as good as it was, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost feel like LA has the edge if that series happens today.
I think with the advanced stats they do, like expected goals and all that sort of thing, I feel like Los Angeles is actually one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, and getting Doughty back, that's a different LA team, I think, that Edmonton faced last year. And it's a different Edmonton team.
Yeah.
Some teams haven't necessarily needed to go all in this year.
It's true.
At the deadline, and it's like, no, it doesn't mean that they're not a good team or they don't think highly of themselves. But this is a sort of a nice kind of on the edges kind of move.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've got some more movement. It looks like nothing official yet, but Elliot Friedman reporting Cody Glass from Pittsburgh headed to New Jersey.
Well, we know the Devils lost Jack Hughes.
Yep. We've not talked about that.
I think Cody Glass is replacing Jack Hughes, but
God,
no.
I mean, it feels like the Devils are in a tough situation where it's like you can't just throw out the season, right? You're a playoff team right now.
He's a lot taller than Jack Hughes.
Very true. Yeah, he's heavier than Jack Hughes.
But he is glass. That's fake glass.
I mean, it feels like kind of a low risk move for New Jersey, where it's like warm body. He did play some good hockey. I think in Nashville, he kind of reawakened.
Better. Like Vegas, he was nothing. Then he goes to Nashville, had a bit of a spark there. Since going to Pittsburgh, hasn't really accomplished much. Then again, what do you expect on that Pittsburgh team?
Yeah.
Former first rounder.
Oh, he will always be a first rounder, Mike.
Oh, sorry. A first rounder.
Style-wise.
I feel bad for New Jersey. Like it's similar to like when you look at St. Louis now losing Colton Parayko.
Yeah.
Probably a bigger loss for New Jersey though, because Jack Hughes, is such a huge component of their offense. And I feel bad for Jack Hughes because he's dealing with this injury sort of stigma attached to him right now. And we were talking about it at the game the other night. That's a small forward group, especially for their top two lines.
Yeah.
Even before the injury, we were wondering what they were going to be doing in the playoffs. And, to be without Jack Hughes, I don't know how you were going to ever replace him going into this deadline. I guess you could have traded for a Mikko Rantanen, but that doesn't really solve your center spot.
Yeah. Braden Shen, I suppose.
I guess, but it was probably going to cost too much. And again, you're almost kind of looking ahead to next year.
It feels like that way. Yeah. It's like you can't throw in the towel, but you also don't want to do something rash.
No.
Because ultimately you're looking at other teams in the Eastern Conference and saying, it might not be our year. We'll do our best. We still have a very good team, but let's not do anything dramatic.
No, it would be one thing if Jack Hughes was slated to be back by like the second round, and then you can be like, well, we might be getting him back, fingers crossed. But he's not coming back. So what do you do? You still have a good team, though.
Yeah.
Still
got Nico Hischier.
Yeah, and that Metro is sort of wide open. Like, I know you're high on Washington. I'm not so sure that it almost feels like that's the team where I'm looking at him going regular season versus playoffs. Yeah. It might be sort of a Jekyll Hyde kind of scenario.
Yeah. And granted, I mean, what I'm saying is like Washington, I don't see a lot of flaws necessarily with the team, but I also see at least a team that has everything you would want. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Carolina and New Jersey now, you can poke holes in them.
I wouldn't be surprised if Washington's that team that goes out in the first round, just because there's always that team.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Not the.
There has to be.
Washington.
All right, so we've officially got the full finalized trade between Colorado and Boston. So Colorado gets Coyle and a 2026 fifth-round pick. Boston receives Middlestat, Zellers, and a 2025 second-round pick. So that is the official final trade there as we see it going through. Guys, I want to talk for a second a little bit as we wait for more trades to keep rolling in. We're just over 30 minutes until we hit that deadline, but we've seen some different players getting picked up off of waivers. Obviously, Ryan Reeves clears today. Toronto had placed him on waivers. What do we think about some of the choices that we've seen from waivers with teams like Nashville, for example, taking Jacob Vrana out of Washington?
Jacob Vrana getting claimed off waivers. What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, waivers, why not, right? I mean, this is a guy that I know he's been trying to build his career back up, and it's been tough. I know Sammy Silver, our Washington Capitals team site editor, had an interview with him recently where he talked about literally trying to put things back together and how tough it had been mentally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a waiver pickup, like, why not? Especially at this point in the season where there's enough runway where you can get in there, you can get some confidence. But, expectations, I would say, got to be a little bit tempered.
How old is Vrana now? Is he
same as Pasternak, same draft?
Yeah, he ain't young anymore. Like it always seemed like he was the kind of guy where you're like, oh, he started off his career pretty well with Washington.
Mm.
He was looking like he was going to be a perennial 20-goal scorer, a guy that was maybe going to flirt with 30 goals. And then, since going from Washington to Detroit and then to St. Louis and then back to Washington, it hasn't been a good fit for him. Just hasn't been able to kind of capture what, made him an effective player early on in his career, especially when he won a cup with the Capitals. So, that Nashville team, it was basically, a found money really for them right now in getting Vrana, not giving up anything. And, maybe you can find a more of an opportunity there.
Well, and honestly, if you're the Preds, it's a warm body.
Yeah.
And you're at the point where this season was a write-off. Nothing really worked out for you. You might as well look ahead and it's open tryouts in a way. It's can you be in our top six? Mm-hmm. We will give you some runway. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Well, guys, we're just 2 minutes away from our official 30-minute countdown mark. So one of the names that is still very much looming on the market, we talked about him a little bit earlier, is a guy like Brad Marchand. Let's have a little fun here and do some speculating. Where do we kind of see a guy like him being a valuable fit? I know they want to send him out west to avoid seeing him at all in the near future, depending on what happens in the free agency. But what are some possible fits for Marchand, and what is a return for him going to look like?
Ooh. I don't know. A lot of the teams in the West have made their moves.
Right.
It's true.
Normally I would have been Colorado would have been a perfect fit for him. Let him play with Nate.
Maybe it's not happening.
Colorado, do they even have the ability to make that kind of move? So they're out of the running. I'm trying to rack my brain here.
How about this? How about Edmonton?
I was just gonna say, but
I mean, maybe it has to be a hockey trade to make the money work. I'm not sure in terms of cap space.
When you look at the season that Leon Draisaitl has, he really doesn't have the line mates to justify. It doesn't feel like it makes sense.
Yeah,
he's had a great year, and then you look at his line mates, and you're going, it's not really fitting there.
Yeah, and we talked about the Oilers being a little bit one-dimensional earlier on. Brad Marchand gives you a different dimension altogether. He has won. Not only does he have a Stanley Cup, but obviously Four Nations, he won gold with McDavid. I mean, if he's going out west, that to me would make the most sense. Because the other thing too is if you're Brad Marchand, if you're leaving the Boston Bruins, the team you are captaining, the team you've played for your entire NHL career, you bleed black and gold, you're not going to Vancouver.
But Vegas,
it's always Vegas, right?
Vegas, okay.
Wait, they've been quiet too.
Corey Perry on the same team. It's like a rat in a worm.
The Rat and the Worm. The Rat and the Worm. I love that.
Can
book.
that work?
Yes, I used to read that to my kids all the time.
But like we're talking about where could he go, and it's just like, what has Vegas done so far at this deadline?
That's what's scary, right?
Trade deadline, isn't it also known as Vegas Golden Knights Day?
Right.
Well, that's like the worst nightmare for what's happening with Boston fans, right? Is they're going to get to 3:00 and they're going to think he's here, he's safe, we did it, we made it. And then Vegas is going to sneak in with that trade that got submitted before the clock ran out. They have been a little quiet, but are they potentially a team that just doesn't necessarily need anything else?
I don't know. It's Vegas. They could always use more players. Yeah.
It's a life of excess. Every day is 1985 Wall Street for the Vegas Golden Knights.
And it's funny, though, because they are usually the team that we're always talking about. Like last year, who would have guessed they would have got Hannafin and Hurdle? And, every year they're putting someone on the LTIR, it feels like, or maybe it's just once, but we always just say it's every year.
Right.
That being said, like if I was going to handicap it, I like Ryan's pick. I would love to see Marchand, playing with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I think he does give them that. What was missing from that playoff series against Florida is like they didn't have anyone to kind of answer back to Kachuk and Bennett.
Yeah.
Like they have Corey Perry, but he's a fourth liner now.
They had Warren Fogle, who's a big body, but he's not Fogle played a little bit with McDavid in that final.
If Evander Kane is healthy,
yeah,
that's the guy.
Yeah.
We don't even know what his situation is really now, if he's going to have the cap space. Like, I guess if that cap space is off the books, then you've got, you can possibly add a Marchand.
Or do you trade Evander Kane for Brad Marchand?
Ooh, that's spicy.
Ooh. That is very spicy. All right, well, we've talked a little bit about what some teams are doing with bringing players in, but the Buffalo Sabres have been busy with some extensions as well. We saw them keeping Jordan Greenway and Jason Zucker. A couple people online kind of confused about signing Zucker now instead of letting the deadline play out. What do we think about the additions that Buffalo is keeping?
I found it strange. And I know Ryan's like, you got to find some guys who actually want to be there. And I guess a guy who was born and raised in Vegas who willingly resigns for Buffalo is a good signal to the rest of the group. But
sure,
Jason Zucker was also on the ice where no one, answered back for that nasty hit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm kind of confused by Kevin Adams. Like, you get Josh Norris. You get Jacob Bernard Docker. I always confuse the names.
JBD.
Yeah, you get JBD. Who's Dylan Cousins, who, he's not off to a great season. We're not having a great season, but I still think his potential is better than Josh Norris's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little confused. I don't think you needed to sign Jason Zucker. Jordan Greenway, I do like that extension. Another big body. But yeah, it's just, this Buffalo Sabres team, like if I'm kind of looking ahead to next year, they don't look any closer to being a Stanley Cup contender.
Well, that's the thing, right? Or a playoff team for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Let's even try for a wild card before crawl before you walk. I don't mind the extensions, but it's like that can't be it because you didn't get better with the Josh Norris trade. If anything, you treaded water, which is fine.
Lateral move, yeah.
Lateral move. But we know Buffalo needs an influx of talent. And is it Elias Pettersson at some point? I don't even know if that's the right move for them. But free agency is not easy for the Sabres. There is that sort of bias from a lot of players that they only see part of Buffalo, and it's not like the most exciting part of Buffalo, even though a lot of players do live in Buffalo after they retire in the surrounding areas. So maybe it's more trade, right? And something has to be done because you have to keep up in an Atlantic division that is absolutely savage right now. And even with Boston falling back, we see Ottawa and Detroit taking steps forward. This cannot be it, I guess, is the most important
And
thing.
I question whether Kevin Adams is the guy to get them out of this hole. You got to be a savvy
getting to that point
dealer to kind of turn a Dylan Cousins into something better. And
you got to win a trade.
You got to win a trade.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Montreal Canadiens. We questioned with their resurgence recently what was going to be their status heading into the deadline and whether it was maybe just nothing. But we did see that they signed Jake Evans to a 4-year extension at $2.85 million a year. What do we think of the deal for him and the fact that, this was a guy that could have brought in some pieces for them, but they decided they want to keep him. And he actually ultimately was the one that really said, I want to stay in Montreal.
I like it. Montreal is in the mix. Right now they are 1 point back of the Ottawa Senators for that final wild card spot. They played one more game than the Sens, and they've got Detroit and the Rangers also to battle for that wild card spot. But they're very much in it. And if Jake Evans wants to be there, that's a great sign. And
yep.
The worst thing they could do is just sort of fold and just start selling guys. So I really hope they keep David Savard at this deadline. The fact that they're keeping Evans is, it's a nice sign and signal to their players. Cole Caulfield just scored his 31st goal the other night. He's having a great year. There's every reason to believe that this team could be a playoff team. And if they just miss out, I still think that's a tremendous season, compared to what we're seeing from a team like Buffalo.
Yeah, the Habs are so interesting because they lose Kirby Dach, and yet they're playing some of their best hockey of the season, and they are close. And I do think it's important to play meaningful games. If you are a Lane Hudson, a Uri Slavkovsky, some of those young kids,
right,
where you don't want them to be in that culture of losing, right? It's like, I don't want to be dumping on the Sabres, but you don't want to be those young Buffalo Sabres players that have never been in the postseason, right? Ottawa got to that point and is still at that point right now where, Brady Tkachuk, we know we want to see him playing meaningful hockey, and he really wants to play meaningful hockey. And hopefully for Senators fans, they see that, in this spring/early summer. So for Montreal, I don't mind them standing pat. I still don't know if they have a legit number one center. I think Nick Suzuki's pretty good. He's more of a 1B in my...
Don't tell Montreal fans that.
Oh, I've been on the radio shows. I've had this argument before. But with the lineup they have, are they good enough to make the playoffs? They're very close, right?
The wild card is so wide open.
It is. And there's a lot of teams you got to pass. But, you have to give Montreal credit for really, getting wins at the right time. And if they, I don't think they need to sell anymore. Let's put it that way. They've built up. I think Kent Hughes has done a great job so far. And if they do nothing, if they just stand pat, I think it's kind of a nice gesture. And again, they still have players coming up, like Michael Hage, right? They just drafted him. Ivan Demidov's going to be coming over. And Ivan Demidov, he could be the answer in their top six. He's not a center, but...
You make a great point about just, everyone wants to rebuild and build prospects, and then they just think it's so easy to flip a switch, right, and then you become that playoff team. And then you got a team like Buffalo going through, what is this, year 13? You got Detroit, what is this, year 9 or something? And even Ottawa, I think this is 7 or 8 years where they haven't made the playoffs. It's so hard to make that transition from, we're tanking. Okay, now we want to start competing. It doesn't always work that way.
It's true.
So if you've got a team that's already telling you, hey, we want to be a little further along on our evolution than you may give us credit for, you got to listen to them. And good on Kent Hughes, good on Marty St. Louis,
coaching them up.
They are not saying that they're going to win a Stanley Cup this year. They're not even saying they're going to make the playoffs, but what they're saying is we're going to give our guys a fighting chance. I would have actually liked to see them maybe make a small little addition move.
Oh.
To kind of say, you know what, guys?
Still time.
Done. Yeah. Keep it going.
All right, well, let's talk about this. Obviously, we know Dallas had the big business earlier by getting the Mikko Rantanen deal done, but now another big one for them is extending Wyatt Johnston. So he agrees to 5 years at $8.4 million per year. He was going to be a UFA this summer, so this is big for Dallas to lock him in.
Yeah.
I think they learned a lesson from, the Jason Robertson, contract. Like, they gave him that bridge deal thinking we are not so sure about him. And then Jason Robertson's not having a great year, but, after signing that deal, he really kind of shut up and really kind of priced himself out going, hey, my next deal is going to be probably double what I'm getting here. So,
totally.
I guess they do recognize that Wyatt Johnston is, a guy that, is, I guess he's part of their – is he now part of their core?
I mean, if he's not, then he's really, really close to it. And, if you talk to the stat heads, they'll tell you this is a bargain based on what Wyatt Johnston has been doing so far and what he's projected to do, because he is still only 21. So
is he that young?
He really is. Like, he joined them pretty early. He was one of those very interesting, like, COVID picks where Dallas really had to drill down on his potential because there was no OHL season, right? So you had the U18s and like any other random ice time, you would have been able to see him. But I know there was scouts that year who were very high on Wyatt Johnston. And the sort of joke was like, when I talked to them, they're like, well, I don't want to say anything too good because I want to make sure he's still available when my team is drafting. Ultimately, Dallas got him.
23rd overall. Like, you redo that draft right now.
Oh yeah,
easy top
10, maybe top 5. Yeah, maybe top 5. And 8.4. We know the cap's going up, right? So 8.4 now. Even next year, or the year after, is more like 7.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to sign Jason Robertson. I can't remember where his contract is due up. I don't know if it's this year or next year. But that's also under consideration. Like, before they made that trade where Logan Stankoven goes the other way, when is he up?
Okay, so Robertson will still be an RFA after 2025-26.
Okay.
So they've got him for all of next year. And he's
when Johnston would have been an RFA as well. That one's on me because he's younger.
Season that were a typical Jason Robertson season. But this guy is going to probably, I don't know if he's a $10 million player, if he's playing the way he is right now, but with the cap going up, it very well could be.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Like, a $10 million player 2 years from now is very different than a $10 million right now. Like, you don't have to be Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
And
especially if you go, more than 5 years on him.
Yeah.
Like if they go the max 8 years, then you don't mind giving them $10 million because by the time year 5 rolls around, the cap is probably going to not double, but it's going to go up tremendously.
Yeah.
What about the Utah Hockey Club? We haven't seen them making any big moves so far today, but they were certainly busy leading up to this deadline, extending a ton of guys. They got Vamelka locked down, Oli Mata, Alex Kerfoot, Ian Cole. So certainly a lot of moves being made there, and maybe they're just waiting for free agency and that's their time to strike. What do you think?
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I thought like Matthias Michelli was going to be a guy that was going to get traded. Utah's right there. Like, the only teams ahead of them right now are St. Louis and Vancouver, and Calgary holding down that final wildcard spot. So they're 3 points back of the Flames for that second wildcard spot in the West. And again, similar to Montreal, expectations. I think you were higher on Utah than I was.
I thought they were a bubble team.
Yeah, I thought they were for sure a non-playoff team. So the fact that they're hovering around, I guess, is where you expected. But still, I would say that this is a pleasant season for the Utah Hockey Club. Still a very young team. Like, the future is so bright. Yeah, you're talking about San Jose's future. Obviously, Utah's further along, but kind of similar to San Jose in that kind of trajectory where they built up their prospects. Bill Armstrong's done such a great job of drafting and developing. They have so many guys in their pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Eventually, they're going to have to make some hard decisions because you can't have all of them.
True. And you know what? I mean, a part of it is I wonder if the strategy, because we got about 15 minutes until the trade deadline ends.
Yep.
Or I guess the trade deadline, as it would be. Keep in mind that Utah, for most of the season, did not have Sean Durzi or John Marino, right? So it's like they kind of got their own mini trade deadline just in those guys returning. And essentially, you got 2 of your top 3 defensemen, right? Like Sergachev's obviously your number 1. And, to your point, the future in Arizona, they have so many guys that are, in Utah, where, like Tisha Ginla, he'll need some time, but Dmitry Simashev, Daniel Boot, they could be along very soon, pushing other players in that lineup. Clayton Keller quietly having an amazing season for them, 70 points in 61 games. Logan Cooley is really starting to pick it up. So imagine what an even better Logan Cooley will be like next year with continued, growth and support from Clayton Keller, totally healthy blue line, and, whatever they happen to add, whether it's from their pipeline or via trade free agency. So I think for Utah, this is a matter of maybe they can deal Michelli if they feel like it, because he's really not, he's not doing what he did a few years ago when it looked like he might win the Calder. But I think for them, it's like, okay, you guys have been great. We're having a nice honeymoon first season in Utah. The fans have been awesome. So let's not subtract if we don't have to. When we're healthy, we have a chance to be a wild card team. If we fall short, at least we were playing meaningful games right up until the end. And I think they will do that. Whether they make the playoffs or not, Utah is going to be a team that we're watching at least for the next month.
And they're going to have a lot of cap space in the summer to make even further moves. Like, they're going to probably get Mitch Marner. So there you go.
All right, well, let's circle back to the East and kind of as we get to our approach of the trade deadline, talk a little bit about what teams that we think might still have some moves that we should expect, or just teams that really shouldn't be done. I mean, who do you guys have your eyes on that you're like, I like what you've done, but maybe we want a little bit more? Maybe Michael wants to see more out of Toronto. What do we think?
I want to see more out of Ottawa.
Okay.
And we talked about it. They went 2 for 1, and the one player they got was Dylan Cousins, who is going to have to replace a lot of the offense that Josh Norris had, but more importantly, he's going to have to replace the chemistry. Like Brady Tkachuk apparently was almost in tears.
It was so sad.
How important Josh Norris is in terms of a friend and just that locker room buddy. It's tough when you make that kind of trade that Ottawa made, and you get a Cousins in. You're going to ask him to find chemistry right away.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work out, I wonder if Ottawa's got to have a plan B there. As far as Toronto is concerned, I don't know if they're going to make another move, if they've got another move up their sleeve. If it is, it's probably just another kind of side move. I know, that right D is something that they've been searching for. Is that what you're expecting them to do?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the Leafs are really weird, and I blogged about this the other day on THN.com. Like, we don't know what a complete Toronto team looks like yet because they've had so many injuries where, you think about them adding Scott Laughton, that's great. But when Max Pacioretty comes back, that's a top 6 winger for you. Yeah. Right? Or, based on their depth.
By the way, the guy can't even stay healthy in a practice, so I don't know if he's going to be the answer for a long playoff run.
Maybe not. But, like Chris Tanev obviously was banged up the other night. So when he gets back, then that's another top 4 defenseman for you. It'll be interesting in Toronto because they have the high-end skill. They definitely have the goaltending now. So maybe they do a little one. For me, it's Carolina. I think they have to do something else.
Yeah.
And it's got to be added
into a Stankoven.
No, it's not enough. No. Unless you're just happy with making the playoffs and maybe winning a round, it's not enough.
Listen, if Toronto's only move or only substantial move is adding a Scott Laughton, there's going to be a lot of Leaf fans who are very disappointed in this deadline because you've got the number one, arguably the best team in the division right now. And you've got, how many years where you just keep falling either in the first round and the 1 year in the second round.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the playoffs are going to depend on their big 4, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, but you look at what Florida does, you look at what Tampa does, and then you look at what Toronto did, and then you're saying, give this team the best chance to win a cup, especially when you're looking at what theoretically could be the last year they have a Mitch Marner. And if this ends up being the year where you lost them, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of second guessing.
That's fair. All right. Well, we are officially at the 10-minute mark before we hit our trade deadline. So I want to kind of ask a similar question about our friends out west. One in particular, a name that we've heard running around a lot, was Brock Besser. And I know we've talked about the Canucks at length. We've obviously talked all about the Elias Pettersson situation. But do we feel like Vancouver has been maybe a little quiet or a little underwhelming, or is there just not much to be done there? But who do you have your eyes on in the West?
It's a good question about the Vancouver Canucks because at one point we thought Pettersson and Besser might get moved at the deadline.
Right.
If they hang on to both, is that a good move for them?
I mean, right now are they a wild card team? I don't know.
They're just outside.
Outside.
They're 1 point back of the Flames, but with a game in hand.
Right. Okay. So let's call them a wild card team for the sake of. They're in the mix. I think it's probably very important for them to make the playoffs. Now, is there a discrepancy between what they believe Brock Besser's value is as, let's face it, a rental because he is a pending UFA,
right,
and what the market dictates? Now, we are at the point at the deadline where it's a game of musical chairs for a contender, and maybe someone is saying like, okay, well, we gotta get somebody. And Brock Besser, I mean, we've seen him in the past. I mean, he's never had 30 goals.
No, he had 40 goals.
Oh, sorry, 40. Yeah, there you go.
But just that 1 year, really.
So, okay, but it was last year. Yeah. So you do have a guy that could help out on your top line if you needed it. He is a rental. Ottawa would be a good one. Yeah, add something up there front. He's got that wicked shot. But the question is, what's the value? He is a rental, and this season has obviously been a circus in Vancouver. So if you're a contender, do you try? Maybe teams have just been lowballing them.
Maybe. I don't think they're getting the best deal, best trade offers for guys there because they know, like you just mentioned, it is a circus. But at the same time, like this is a Vancouver team that won the division last year, and then to be out of a playoff spot at the deadline, oh boy, have they fallen!
And they already dealt Carson Soucy.
Yeah.
So here's
much worse ever since they traded JT Miller.
I
know they had to do something there.
Yeah.
But there's probably a lot of people going, okay, they traded the wrong guy. And, Pettersson, he hasn't looked right all year and certainly didn't look good at the Four Nations. Since the Four Nations, he's pointed the finger at himself saying he needs to be better. If he can lead the team into the playoffs, I think that would be all right. But again, if you make the playoffs, Ryan, you play Vegas or you play Winnipeg or Dallas in the first round?
Yeah.
What do you expect for Vancouver to do?
Yeah.
Well, guys, the Vegas Golden Knights Twitter account, which is just infamous for messing with everyone and creating all kinds of chaos, just tweeted hi. Nothing else, just hi. And people online are freaking out because it's like, oh no, here they come. They waited till we've got 7 minutes until the deadline. Are they trolling us or is something coming?
I hope something's coming.
Selfishly, right?
Though.
Just to see the chaos of it.
They could just be saying hi to everyone.
Well, let's talk a little bit now as we kind of wait for our final deadline to approach. Which player right now is the happiest that's been moved today? Who's feeling really good?
Ooh. That is a really good one. Like initially, I'm gonna say Mikko Rantanen, but why wouldn't he?
I'm not sure he is. I don't know.
Necessarily, I went from a terrible situation to a better situation. Although, is the barbecue better in North Carolina or is it better in Texas?
Well, I was gonna joke maybe Mikko Rantanen is a brisket guy and not a pulled pork guy.
Is that the difference?
That's the big difference, right? Okay. Texas is brisket. Maybe he doesn't like vinegar-based pulled pork
sauce.
It's more. Was it mesquite? They like it? I don't know what they like.
You know what? If you're doing brisket right, it's just salt and pepper. You just let the smoke do the work. Break down.
Ryan Kennedy, certified brisket guy.
You know what?
I'm going to say Brock Nelson. You know what? Brock Nelson.
That's a good one.
Goes from the New York Islanders, and I know he was so emotional, and why wouldn't he be? He spent his whole career in Long Island, or on Long Island, as they say.
On Long Island.
But to go to a Colorado team, Katie, that team well.
Oh, it's scary.
Nelson be the happiest guy in deadline day. He gets to not only be on a contender, but he's insulated. Okay, he's got not only Nate McKinnon ahead of him, but he's got now Charlie Coyle behind him, and then that defense. So, I imagine Brock Nelson's probably going, this is my one chance that I've got now to win a Stanley Cup, and why wouldn't you be happy with that opportunity?
Yeah.
He's already out there on the ice with them too. I mean, he didn't waste any time. He is like, get me to Colorado right now.
Amazing. I would say too, like Riley Smith going back to Vegas.
Yeah.
Original misfit.
Original misfits. And, he won a cup with them. He had tremendous success with them. I mean, his career really took off with the Golden Knights. And not that the Rangers are a bad situation. I mean, they're obviously not in a playoff spot right now, but for him to return, it's obviously a comfortable environment. And again, as we're saying, the West is going to be a buzzsaw, especially with what Colorado and Dallas has done. And Winnipeg, making those nice little sort of edge moves. But Vegas, even if the high is for naught, Vegas still has a pretty potent lineup to deal with.
The other guys, obviously, like Yanni Gourde going back to Tampa, that's a huge win.
Been a lot of reunions.
Don't forget Seth Jones.
True.
Misery.
That's
not
great
this
point.
year, but year after year in Chicago. Not only was he losing, but people were just slamming him, just criticizing. This isn't the defenseman that, he doesn't deserve these accolades. And now he's going to a Florida team or he's on a Florida team.
Yeah.
Where he's going to get the spotlight on him, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that move. I like Seth Jones in general. I thought, I was one of those guys who tweeted out when Chicago got Seth Jones saying, oh boy, this makes Chicago a playoff team. And trust me, after every loss, I get someone retweeting me. Is this you idiot?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Twitter is forever, and they never fail to remind us of the dumb things that we say. But we are 3 minutes away, so we've got some. It's gotten a little quiet. I've just been sitting here every 5 seconds and just refreshing my insiders on Twitter. And so far, we're not seeing anything as we get closer to the deadline. Let's talk a little bit about who's not having a good day. And I'm opening this question up to not just players that have been moved somewhere, but players maybe on teams that are currently sitting and watching this deadline and they're like, what about me? I guess Connor Bedard is who I'm thinking of, but anyone else is up for grabs as well.
Bedard, that's a tough spot because it's not like the Blackhawks were going to add.
No, he's just having a bad day and just
not like a
watching it.
That's now on a team that's just in the dumps.
To a pretender?
Yeah.
Yeah,
who just got their potential run taken away.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you spend all those years in Ottawa.
This is finally going to be the year.
This is going to be the year. Now that you get knocked. It's like snakes and ladders. Yeah. Josh Norris is a very good one.
Yeah. And especially the year he's having. Like 20 goals this year. Basically same production as Tim Stützle. Both 20-goal scorers. He's done it in far less games. I know he was dealing with some injuries throughout the year, but again, that was sort of the prize at the end. Sometimes we forget, when you have gone through year after year of falling short with the same group of guys, and then you get that close to making the playoffs, there is kind of we finally broke through, guys. We did it, but you're not part of that now.
Yeah.
So it does hurt. It doesn't hurt as much as a guy getting traded and then your team wins the Stanley Cup. But at the same time, I expect Ottawa to be in the playoffs. I don't know if they've quite done enough, but even before the deadline, I was like, okay, with Allmark healthy, with Brady Tkachuk playing, back healthy, playing the way he is, this is a playoff team. I thought, the wild card is there for the taking. Not to have Norris part of it. That's probably why Brady Tkachuk is also so emotional. Yeah,
that's a good point. With 1 minute to go, I'll say Braden Shen in St. Louis. And I don't know if Braden Shen, I'm sure he's fine sticking in St. Louis. Yeah. But with the Blues losing Colton Parayko, for the season, it kind of felt like that was an opportunity for them to at least shed a contractor to look a little ahead to the future.
Right.
Because they're in a very interesting spot where they have those veterans like a Braden Shen, like a Cam Fowler, who they just brought in this year, who's an older player.
Right.
Colton Parayko's not old, but he's played enough seasons. But then you have Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Philip Broberg, Dylan Holloway.
Yep.
Guys that I wouldn't call them the next generation because they're already here, but they're about to get into their prime, or with Thomas and Kyrou, they're already in their prime.
Mispronounce a name.
Okay, here's the story. His name is
It
actually
happened finally.
Greek. I met his aunt, but because nobody at like TSN would say it right, he was like, Kyrou's fine because he's a nice
Oh, so we are getting the inside scoop on the real pronunciation.
Yeah, but anyways, so according to
How about Jordan Binnington? Should he be upset that he didn't get moved?
I think he should be happy that everybody loves him right now because he won the Four Nations.
I would have loved to see him get moved to Edmonton, but I don't think that was.
What about John Gibson?
That's an interesting one because it's like, well, I mean, he's a
what's
big game winner.
because I thought like St. Louis should kind of do Edmonton a solid for stealing two of their top prospects.
Right.
You can have Binnington.
You could have Binnington, even though they gave them, was it Paul Schultz or no? Who did they get? The prospect.
Oh, in the Holloway Broberg.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, the trade deadline has officially passed. It is 3:01 Eastern time, so we are now just kind of having to wait and see what's going on. But Elliot Friedman just tweeted last-minute possibility. Hearing Brad Marchand could be traded to Florida. Come on.
Oh.
Oh, man. That would be insane.
Okay, so if you're Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews and William Nylander, not only will you have to deal with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett.
Right.
No, just from a physicality standpoint.
Fair enough.
But now you got Brad Marchand, who knows how to get under Marner's skin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, it's not official, but that is a very interesting one.
Yeah, that's crazy. We're also seeing, so the Blackhawks have said they are keeping pending UFAs Ryan Donato and Pat Maroon. They are done for the day. The Canadiens are keeping UFAs Joel Armia and David Savard. They are done for the day. No extension in place for Besser in Vancouver, but the Canucks are done for the day. So we're hearing teams kind of announcing that things are done. But certainly now all eyes are on South Florida because that is one big looming possibility. Seems interesting that would be the move because earlier we heard Boston very specifically saying if there was a move to be made, they wanted it to be out west. But maybe, like you mentioned, those moves got taken away by other trades. So Florida does still have some money to work with. I don't know what to think about this, guys.
Where's Fort Lauderdale? Is that on the western side of the state?
Eastern side.
On the eastern side, it's about 40 minutes from Miami.
Yeah. It's west of nothing because it's on the coast. It's west of Bermuda.
Oh my God. What do you think of that, Katie?
I mean, the only thing that I can say, and I don't necessarily, because of the player that Marchand is, I don't feel like this is the same scenario, but it makes me think about when Florida went out and brought in Claude Giroux, captain, really good player. And it seemed like such a big fish and a slam dunk and everyone was excited about it. And it really didn't go well. It just wasn't the right fit. It didn't mesh. The power play got screwed up because of it. I don't think that Panthers team was ready at that point. I'm not sure if that would be the case, though, with Marchand because of the personality that he is, because of the type of player that he is. I think his identity is a perfect match to what Florida is all about. So that's why not only bringing in a captain and a big fish, but a guy who plays exactly the way they want. It's why at this point, I'm terrified of Dallas, Colorado, and Florida, even before they make that move. If they add Marchand, then oh my goodness, think of the possibilities of what we could see in a cup final.
Yeah, and you're gonna get arrested, Matthew Tkachuk, as well.
That's right.
That's the big thing is, I know they've got a lot of miles in their body because they went back to the final, and it's really hard to, it's hard to go back to the final. Never mind 3 straight years in the final as Tampa did. Granted, there was some COVID in the middle of that as well. But when you've got, you're bringing in a Seth Jones who hasn't played in the playoffs in a while, and then if you bring in a Marchand, and then if you also get a Tkachuk who was rested, that's dangerous right there.
It really is. And just to jump back to what Katie was saying, something that I think was a really good move was Chicago keeping Ryan Donato, because it's been a really bad season for the Blackhawks, but Ryan Donato, suspension notwithstanding, really good for them. Yeah. So, a lot of the moves Chicago's made in the Kyle Davidson era have not worked, but Ryan Donato, I would say he's a guy that I think it's nice to keep him, and if they keep him long term, all the better. I think it's nice for Connor Bedard, obviously, to see them keep talent as well.
Pierre LeBrun just tweeting, still pending league call, but told Brad Marchand is going to Florida.
Wow.
That's got to be the bomb. That's the bomb of the day.
Florida are trade deadline winners?
They are now. Well, at least in the East. The West, I don't think you can really go against what Dallas did in Colorado. Yeah, Dallas and Colorado.
Yeah, James Myrtle tweeted that he does not think that the Leafs are done. So, what do we? I don't know what move we have there.
Be on the same level as getting a Brad Marchand, in my mind. It's going to be hard to top that, and it's going to be hard to top what Tampa and Florida did in the East. Like those two are the winners in the East.
This really also makes it crucial for Toronto to win the division, because then you have Florida, and you want Florida.
They eliminate each other.
Have a pitched battle in the first round, and absolutely just like slaughter each other for 7 games, and hope that you play, like the Rangers, like a team that's not going to be hard to play against physically.
Now Toronto is not in first place though, right?
But game in hand,
they're 2 points back of the Florida Panthers. But now with the Florida Panthers getting Brad Marchand, it does look like, and Florida's on a 5-game heater right now as well. Playing the best hockey of the season for them. It's going to be difficult. Like the way it's setting up, it's going to be Toronto, Tampa, and the winner gets to play Florida.
Yeah,
or has to play Florida.
Yeah.
Talk about a blessing in disguise with this Tkachuk situation. My gosh.
It's true.
I'm not saying that Tkachuk is not very much an LTIR guy, especially considering they don't even know if it's a guarantee he will be ready for round 1. Depends on how the injury pans out. But this is a Vegas feeling move. This is exactly what you're worried about right down at the end in the trade deadline, and they are certainly a scary team. I think, you mentioned it, and it's perfect. It's never become more important to be winning first place now. If you can get these big-time heavy hitters to eliminate each other.
Also, Florida looks more like the Bruins than the Bruins ever did. They got a Bruin on their team, but they are playing sort of Bruins hockey now.
Yeah. The big bad Panthers.
Yeah, like they're just such a mean team. And, Seth Jones is also big body on the back end.
Yeah. Not mean, but big.
He's not mean, but he's got that reach.
Yeah. What just occurred to me? I mean, this has been such a good 2 months for hockey in the NHL, starting with the Four Nations. And then now we get a trade deadline where Mikko Rantanen, one of the best players in the world, gets dealt.
Yeah.
Brad Marchand, no longer one of the best, but one of the biggest personalities.
Totally biggest personality, yeah.
Is apparently being dealt. It feels like this was more like an NBA trade deadline, where it's not just like, there's a couple of guys that can slot in, and no, it's like superstars are getting traded.
It's like a Luka Doncic kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, cats are hanging out with dogs. Like everything is
guys,
it's upside down.
Cats and bears, actually.
Cats and bears.
We've got some news for Toronto. Chris Johnston reporting, nothing official, but the Leafs are getting Brandon Carlo.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
It's not Brad Marchand.
It's Brad Marchand, but
no, you do get a guy that, similar to Chris Tanev, he plays a role.
Yeah.
Knows the kind of style he plays. Craig Berube's going to love him.
Oh, yeah.
For what Toronto's doing, like, just looking like within a vacuum to get Scott Laughton at center and Brandon Carlo on defense. That's sort of what Toronto needed.
That's what people wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another forward, another defenseman.
Yeah, exactly. And, Edmonton should be kicking themselves because I think Brandon Carlo is more along the lines of the defenseman they needed.
That's
not a
call.
Jake Wallman.
Yeah.
But for Toronto, again, a guy that was in the thorn of their sides. Like, it would have been great had they got a Charlie Coyle and Brandon Carlo because that would have been exactly what they needed.
Right.
But it's not a bad deadline. But again, it's not viewed inside a vacuum. It's viewed inside the fact that Florida got so much better.
Sure.
And even if Florida didn't get better, it's a dangerous team.
Yeah.
And Tampa Bay got a lot better, and they got some guys they got a guy they're familiar with. So, oh boy, this is going to be a nice run up until to the end of the regular season because, like you said, the standings do matter.
Yeah,
if you're Toronto,
now they really do.
Yeah, if you can face your wildcard team, that might be Ottawa, might be Columbus. Looks a lot better than Tampa Bay.
Yeah. So weird how the East and West are different like that. It's like in the West, it's like, doesn't matter where you finish. You might have to play Colorado in the first round. In the East, it's like, you need to finish first.
It's pretty terrifying. So we see the Carolina Hurricanes announcing that they are done for the day. So no more moves coming there, which probably fair. They maybe could have squeezed out something, but they've been busy. So talk to me a little bit about just
Katie, do you think that the Carolina Hurricanes, going into the deadline, they had Mikko Rantanen. Coming out of the deadline, they've got Logan Stankoven.
Right. I mean, we talked about this leading up to us with all the rumors that we saw about Rantanen that, there wasn't really a scenario where they're going to end up happier. But at the same time, it obviously was a matter of risking what they were going to lose. And it's pretty clear that whatever we don't know from behind the scenes, Mikko Rantanen was giving signs and signals that he was not a fan of being there, didn't want to stay there. So, I got to give them credit for making a hard decision and choosing to move on now. But when we talked about it earlier, you guys were spot on. This is making me much less excited about what the Hurricanes might do. I always kind of worry about them once they get into the playoffs anyway. Felt like maybe Mikko was going to be that game breaker that they need that we talked about Nate just being so long ago. I don't know what excites me about Carolina at this point.
Yeah, you're basically banking on them being like that hard forechecking team.
They do that every year, and it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Like it didn't work last year. It didn't work the year before. So why is it going to work this year when the competition in the East got better?
Yeah, they're always missing.
Oh, wow.
It feels like.
Yeah.
And that's what you really need in the playoffs. I know you need good goaltending, and it's a war of attrition, so you need depth. But more importantly, you need some guys that, when it's a tight scoring game, you're going to have a guy break out and score. And that's what Rantanen was supposed to be.
Exactly.
Like, this guy, all he does is, put up points, especially in the playoffs. Like when Colorado won the Cup, he led the entire playoffs in scoring. So,
guys, this one is
like Eric Tulsky kind of, I don't know. He looks like, I don't want to say he's the big loser at the deadline, but definitely not the big winner.
I was gonna say he ain't a winner.
This one's interesting. It's a feel-good story. Elliot Friedman tweeting out that Colorado, he's hearing, is bringing back Wyatt Johnston. Obviously, we know was heart and soul character guy, part of that Cup run in 22. He is, from personal experience, insanely beloved out there by the team, by the fans, by everyone. So Colorado is a wagon, and now they're having one more that they're having jump back on. And Wyatt Johnston, it's interesting.
Yeah, I like that. Wyatt Johnston, I've always found he's a great guy to deal with. Yeah. Teammates love him. He's big. If you're going on a Stanley Cup run where you're going to run into injuries and you're going to run into questions about your depth, Wyatt Johnston at this point in his career is that perfect guy where He can give you minutes on that bottom pairing if necessary.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not an everyday player in the playoffs, but that's okay.
Yeah, you need as many bodies, especially on the back end where guys blocking shots are gonna get hurt and just get banged up, and a first overall pick.
That's right.
Not a former.
Not a former. He still is. They can't take that way.
Yeah. I still question their goaltending though. Like, I know
and Eric Johnson, he never even got rid of his house out there. So this is like the easiest trade ever. He's like, I'm just gonna move back home. It's perfect.
Who's living in his house?
I think he was renting it, or when you're a first overall pick, you got that cash. So
that's true. And
the guy makes it work.
With 13th overall and goals saved above expected.
Okay.
He also owns horses that are named after the majority of his Avalanche teammates. So.
Oh, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, we got the Landeskog, we got a McKinnon, a McCarr. It's a.
That would be a feel-good story if a Landeskog comes back.
Oh, yeah, the whole band gets back together and they make a run. All right, guys. Well, we are now 16 minutes past the deadline, so we continue. It's always interesting, right? There's that queue of trade calls. So if there was one trade that you could see happen now that would just appear out of nowhere, what would it be?
A trade that came out of nowhere?
That just appeared, that you loved.
Wow. The Brad Marchand one. I'm still in shock over it. Like, I'm kind of thinking to myself, is this real life?
Right.
It really did come out of nowhere. I know there was talk that Brad Marchand was gonna get traded or potentially gonna get traded, but it just seemed like so far-fetched. I would have handicapped it as lower than Pettersson getting moved or Besser even getting moved. It didn't seem like it was possible. I honestly thought that Boston was going to announce that they had re-signed Marchand, but I'm still holding out hope I expect that he'll probably end up going back to Boston after this year. But the fact that he's been a lifelong Bruin. And you talk about it, like it almost felt like he was going to begin and end his season in Boston, and to go not just to another team but a rival.
Yeah.
What do we think that?
It certainly is. For me, it's the Dylan Cousins trade. I know Dylan Cousins' name was out there, but I thought it would be more of a, Buffalo trading him to a team that wanted to take the next step as a contender. Whereas we almost saw sort of a lateral trade where Ottawa, maybe they're a wild card team, they're fighting for it and maybe they get in. Trading him for Josh Norris, a guy who, as we said earlier, it's like similar age, similar cap hit and contract, similar production. Maybe Cousins has a bit more upside. That one was surprising to me just because I wasn't sure, I guess Ottawa gets a bit better, but usually the trades, it's like one team gets better now and the other team gets better in the future. This one, it doesn't feel like that.
Know what it felt like? That's like an off-season trade to me.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the deadline is about rentals.
Yeah. It's a hockey trade.
It's a hockey trade. It's very similar to the Bowen Byram, Casey Middlestat trade a year ago. So Kevin Adams has sort of a track record for making hockey trades. Kind of. I know this wasn't a 1-for-1, but it felt like very much like that. That's kind of it is surprising that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we've got Utah sending Shea Weber's contract to Chicago. In return, Utah receives a 2026 sixth-round pick. Chicago is also getting Victor Soderstrom and Eku Ratti.
Well, Chicago's going to benefit from the leadership of Shea Weber's contract.
Clearing out that cap.
That's a really random trade because Victor Soderstrom at one point was a pretty decent prospect and it just didn't work out. Ratti is, maybe a fourth liner at best. And then obviously Shea Weber no longer plays hockey.
Yes.
So
it also
feels like the accountants made the trade.
Yes. So as of right now in the queue, what we know of is the Marchand Panthers, Carlo Leafs, Eric Johnson Avs, and then Zetterlund to the Sens.
Oh,
Zetterlund had been good for San Jose. Like him and Will Smith had found some chemistry.
I kind of like that move for the Sens.
Yeah, they add somebody.
Yeah, no, that is a good pickup for Ottawa. We just saw Zetterlund the other night because San Jose was in town and
Yep.
scoring the shootout winner against the Leafs. You know, a good youngish player. He's got to be under 20. Is he under 23?
25.
25. Okay. I like this move for Ottawa. Like you combine now Cousins and Zetterling, it's sort of, you know, it's got the makings of a better trade deadline for Ottawa.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So,
All right. Well, as we wait to see what is actually happening with the trade calls, what is a return for a Brad Marchand? What is Florida giving up? Because we talked about how crazy it is that he's going there. What's Boston going to get?
yeah, that's a good question.
Justin Surtiff. That's my prediction.
I don't even know.
Okay.
He's a prospect. He's played some games for the Panthers.
He scored actually the other night.
You know, you look at Florida, and they don't have a deep prospect pool themselves because, again, as we see in Future Watch, buy it online now. That's the way. Actually, public service announcement. It's not on newsstands. Buy it from thehockeynews.com. That'll be the fastest way to get it. Panthers only had one player in the top 100, Linus Eriksson. But Justin Surtiff, he's already 22. You know, he's got. I think he's played a little bit with the Panthers this year. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a pick or two involved.
There's got to be.
Yeah, I don't know what Florida has left in terms of picks.
This one just coming in.
Either.
We've got Darren Dreger tweeting, if it got done in time, Buffalo sending Henry Yokiharu to Boston.
Okay.
That's
Warm
kind of
body.
interesting.
They lost Carlo. Got to replace him. It's not the same player, but he plays the same position.
Why do you need that if you're Boston? Are you still thinking playoffs?
No, you're just thinking you need somebody to play. Right?
Young guys. Who cares?
Yeah, they already got Mason Lowry, who's still pretty young. Honestly, I think it's just a warm body like Yoki Haru. You know, I mean, he can be a number 4 for you.
Where do you expect Brad Marchand to be, like in that lineup in Florida when everyone's healthy? Is he still a top 6 guy for you on that team? Or do you think that, like Four Nations, I know Four Nations, it was stacked, and you could put him on a 4th line, but is Brad Marchand maybe a 3rd line guy for the Panthers?
That's what I'm wondering. You put him on a line with Anton Lundell.
Yeah.
That would be a hot line. Because then you have somebody no fun to play with on your top 3 lines, whether it's like the excellence of Barkov or the physicality of Bennett or just the general peskiness of Brad Marchand.
And you just roll over teams in waves kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Because Marchand's not the same as he was like 3-4 years ago.
No.
And I think we saw
a good player.
Good player, but I think we saw that at the Four Nations where he wasn't like super effective, right? He was like fine, he was good, but I remember thinking like, he might not be on the Olympic team depending on if there's a degradation of his skills in, you know, a calendar year. But you put him on a 3rd line in Florida, and that would be a bad matchup for other teams.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him playing with Chuck.
Yeah. How about play like Kachuk on one side, Marchand on the other side, Sam Bennett in the middle?
I would just be like, yeah, I'm going to vote to skip that shift. Thanks very much. I will take the option on that one. All right, guys, we keep waiting to see if any more trades and moves are going to be rolling in. If you're a fan base right now, I guess, you know, similar to the question earlier, maybe about players, but which fan base is just feeling unsatisfied? I mean, maybe Boston's just sad because of the Marchand news, or maybe it's a team that just didn't feel like they went out and did enough. But what fan base right now is just sort of like not feeling too happy?
Well, if you're Boston, I think it's like, okay, well, that's it. Like this is the end of an era.
Yeah.
Even if Marchand comes back next year.
Which is very possible.
Which is very possibly good. And then Brandon Carlo, I mean, who knows? Charlie Coyle, like these guys are all gone now.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to assume that they're not all going to come back.
No, there's no guarantee that Marchand re-signs with them.
Also true.
Yeah.
So I think if you're a Bruins fan, you're like, okay, let's start, doing our research on the 2026 NHL draft, and can we get a top player from that crew? Because I mean, they're not going to be terrible this year. I do think if you're a Bruins fan, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, that's it for us.
Yeah, I agree. And in the West, I'm going to say Vancouver. Again, what a difficult year it's been for the Canucks. And, Brock Besser was your chip. You could have gotten something big for him, definitely. And now you're going to, you're probably going to lose him to free agency.
Mm-hmm.
After the season is over and done with, you lost JT Miller. I know you got a Philip Sheetal for him, but he's not JT Miller.
Nope.
And you're probably going to lose a Brock Besser for nothing. You might miss the playoffs again.
Yep.
Not again, but I mean, like you might miss the playoffs, and
yeah.
It's just such a fall from grace, especially if the Calgary Flames make the playoffs instead of Vancouver
or Utah.
Yeah, Calgary would hurt even more, I think.
That's a good point. Yeah. Spiritually.
What would you guys say is your, just the most confusing move of, either the day or of the trade deadline overall?
That's a good question.
Other than the Shea Weber deal?
Oh, yes.
I guess the deal.
Do you think he was informed that his contract was being moved?
Yeah. Yeah, the whole Joe Veleno, Peter Mrazek, Craig Smith one was a bit of a head scratcher.
Okay.
Yeah, the Buffalo one, just it still doesn't make a lot. Like you've got Dylan Cousins in, you flipped them from Josh Norris and JBD. I don't know. That one is confusing to me. It seems like we're going over this. We're treading over the same waters here. We're like Brad Marchand. It's confusing. How is he in Florida?
How about this one as we wait to see if there's any more news coming down, which, could be a minute, but let's see. If we're going back historically, because Brad Marchand is a perfect example of a last minute full-blown trade deadline bomb being dropped. What's your favorite one of all time? Like, think back on just the unbelievable moment in history where you were just like, holy smokes.
So my memory isn't what it used to be, Katie. So I go back to last year and the fact that they ended up getting Thomas Hertl, and wasn't that like around the same time? It was like after the deadline we found out.
It was pretty late, yeah.
And we were like, what? That's where Thomas Hertl's going? But
right.
How is that going to happen?
Yeah.
So, this one is very much along the same lines where it was like, we weren't waiting to say, okay, Brad Marchand's getting, or I guess we mentioned it, like Brad Marchand is in play. He's going to get moved somewhere, and I can't believe it's Florida. Last year we were kind of saying the same thing where we all knew Hertl was going to get moved. Well, where was he going to get moved? And it's like, well, Vegas has already made their moves. They're not going to get him. And then lo and behold, they ended up getting him. It didn't work out for Vegas. And that's the thing that we always got to remember is, sometimes the deadline day, big winner is not the winner when all is said and done. Like we were talking about this, like it's always the Michael Hanzuses and the Ron Haineses and guys of that ilk who end up making, quote unquote, like the bigger impact. We'll see if that's the case. And, maybe when all is said and done, like Toronto looks very smart saying, okay, well, we didn't get the biggest name at forward. We didn't get the biggest name on defense, but for what we needed, Brandon Carlo and Scott Laughton, make a lot of sense for us. And we'll see, because, right now it's hard to not like what Dallas did. It's hard not to like what Colorado or Florida or even Tampa Bay did, but will it lead to a cup? And, that is the great unknown right now.
Very true. Only one team can win it. I have no memory. I don't know what happened at any deadline. Everything is just right in front of me. That's all I can think of. But the Thomas Hertl one is a very good one. Yeah.
I like it. All right. Well, who are, the winners in terms of, you weren't going to be winners because you weren't buyers, but who are our winners that were sellers, and the guys that maybe just recouped assets or built up whatever pipelines they're going to hopefully be seeing in the next couple of years, but who are the selling winners?
I'll go Pittsburgh. We talked about this earlier.
Sure.
The fact that Kyle Dubas got at least 3 picks that I can think of in a couple of seconds. I think that was a tidy little bit of business because it gives him assets moving forward. It allows him and Wes Clark, his draft guru, to fatten up that pipeline, which has been tragic for the past decade, maybe longer at this point. I kind of feel this was the mission for the Penguins right now, and I think they actually nailed it.
I like that. I like Seattle as well. If we're gonna just look in the other conference,
Yeah.
The deals, Yanni Gord and Borgstrom, they accrued a lot of picks for both those guys, and you could argue not the biggest names, not even close to the biggest names, and they still did pretty well. And I like that Seattle team. It's like they don't look like they're far away they look like they're so far away from the playoffs when you look at them right now, because they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but they got a great young core.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the playoffs 2 years ago.
They won a round.
They beat Colorado, won around the defending champs that year.
Yeah.
So I kind of like what they did. And, Ron Francis, I tweeted this earlier in the week. I said, Ron Francis, take a bow. You're able to kind of, convince Tampa Bay to give up more first round picks.
Yeah.
I just saw a great tweet. Somebody asked, has anyone ever been traded after being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Oh.
Shea Weber contract.
I can't even think of that.
Or Pavel Datsyuk? No. Datsyuk just got in recently.
I think Chris Pronger.
Maybe Chris Pronger.
Yeah.
I think Chris Pronger was working at the NHL's head office and got traded.
Oh boy, guys, here we go. I'm not sure that Michael's not going to like this one, but the package for Brandon Carlo includes Fraser Minton.
Ooh, that's harsh.
It's harsh, but what is Fraser Minton? He's probably 3 years from now he's going to be their third line center.
True. Yeah. Good work by Boston.
Yeah,
for getting Fraser Minton, because that's the prospect from Toronto that you want.
Future Charlie Coyle.
Future Scott Laughton.
Oh man. No, it's not a bad. I would rather they give up Fraser Minton than Easton Cowan or a Ben Danford.
I'm the opposite, but
is that right?
Yeah,
you're not high on Cowan. Too small.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe he'll be Nick Robertson.
Oh, he's better than Nick Robertson.
Well, we thought Nick Robertson was better than Nick Robertson.
I know. Very similar trajectory.
Yeah. World Juniors. Didn't do anything.
Well, guys, as we look ahead and friendly reminder that we will have a normal show as scheduled on Tuesday where we can continue to break it down. But I guess I just want to ask this last question is, who do you think the possible long-term winner in all of this is? We've obviously talked about the moves that are the right now, big-time moves, but who's made some moves today that are setting them up for the most success, maybe a year from now?
Dallas Stars.
Totally.
They got 8 years of Mikko Rantanen.
And Wyatt Johnston for 5.
Yep. No, I love Dallas. They're going to be a juggernaut for years.
Yeah.
Basically the next decade.
Yeah.
I get used to seeing Dallas topping the Central.
Guys, I think it's about that time that we wrap this up. It's been unbelievable. 2 straight hours of breakdowns, of analysis, breaking news with amazing trades. And the good news is that even after we wrap this up, there's still some more in that trade queue that we will have a lot of fun chatting about on Tuesday. We will continue to break everything down, see how these new guys do with their new teams as we get some hockey action over the weekend. But give a shout out to where you guys were broadcasting from today, because it was an awesome setup.
Yeah, we're at the Bottom Line in Toronto on Front Street, right by the Hockey Hall of Fame. Great spot, and we are very happy that we could broadcast live from here and have an awesome lunch at the same time.
Yeah, if you're in Toronto, definitely check out the Bottom Line. Great food, great drinks, and like Ryan said, it's right next door to the Hockey Hall of Fame and walking steps away from Scotiabank Arena. So if you're here for the Leaf game, if you're here to check out some exhibits at the Hockey Hall of Fame,
Great.
do yourself a favor and check out the fine folks here at the Bottom Line.
Well, speaking of fine folks, a big shout out to our entire crew at the Hockey News for making this broadcast happen live today. And for all the writers out there that are pumping out amazing stories that you can check out on our website. So much good coverage, and it's not going to end anytime soon as we break this all down after the fact. But guys, great work today. Thank you to everyone tuning in for our live show here on the Hockey News Big Show. That does it for this round of trade deadline coverage. We'll see everybody next week. Enjoy the day.
There we go.